Good morning, church. It's good to be with you today. First place I want to look is 2 Kings chapter 3, verse 27. This has to be the most puzzling verse in our reading today, even though we've read and encountered many extraordinary things as Elijah passes the mantle to Elisha, and Elisha begins working miracles in God's name and does incredible things. You can post any questions about his life below. But what I wanted to look at was how the siege of Moab ended. It says, so he, the king of Moab, took his firstborn son, who was to become king in his place, and offered him as a burnt offering on the wall. Great wrath was on the Israelites, and they withdrew from him and returned to their land. We get the impression that this was an effective tactic against Israel, and that something happened as a result of this child sacrifice that forced Israel to cease their siege of this city of Moab and to go back home, which is really weird because we would have expected to see that God would have found that abhorrent and therefore succeeded in the siege and Moab being conquered. But it's reversed from what we would have expected. And if you go and you try to search up answers, there's a lot of thoughts on reasons why this would have been the case. And it seems like the most frequently given and the one that seems to make sense is that seeing the act was incredibly disheartening to Israel, maybe even caused them some fear if they believed that there were really other deities out there, which they did. Isaiah, in the back half of his letter, says that they're not real. They're not real entities, but are just like a stump of wood. I think Paul makes the same kind of argument. But these folks believed it to be true, and the Moabites believed it to be true, and so they rallied and they went. And, just like taking a placebo pill can have a real effect, doing this abominable act was a spiritual placebo, and it generated the intended effect. And this reminds us that we can never be dissuaded or caught off guard by the false or the even apparent potent spirituality of people opposed to the Christian faith. We need to trust in the Lord our God through the thick and the thin of it and not be dismayed or dissuaded by anything. And then we go into 1 Timothy and we get a glimpse of what the law is for. This is quite the list here. We know that the law is not meant for a righteous person, but for the lawless and rebellious, for the ungodly and sinful, for the unholy and irreverent, for those who kill fathers and mothers, for murderers, for the sexually immoral and homosexuals, for slave traders, liars, perjurers, and for whatever else is contrary to sound teaching that conforms to the gospel concerning the glory of the blessed God which was entrusted to me. The law is for those opposed to God because in it is judgment. Paul makes that same argument in other places in Romans. I heard the law and then it sprang. The prohibition caused the sin to spring to life in me, and then I died because the law made me die. Not that the law is bad, but the law is good, and it is that reflection of God's perfect standard of conduct. And so the law is for those who are opposed to God and have not yet come under the grace of Christ. Because, verse 5, the goal of our instruction is love that comes from a pure heart, a good conscience, and a sincere faith. The goal of our instruction is love. Remember, Paul talks a lot about the role of love, that action of putting the needs of others before ourselves. He talks a lot about that. The goal of giving the gospel in a way that it could be understood, a ultimate loving act. Even laying our lives down, being poured out as a drink offering. And so we want to receive the instructions that Paul is going to give Timothy for this reason, that we can have love and so that we can keep fighting the good fight. Verse 18. That's what I want to encourage you in again today, church. Keep fighting the good fight. Don't grow weary in doing good. Don't be put off by the seeming power of those opposed to our God. Keep trusting, keep believing, like Jesus told Jairus. Just keep believing. I love you, church. I look forward to talking to you soon again.